welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, Justin Baker, my co-host, ready for the top 10 New York Rangers and the Anaheim Ducks. We are going to not commingle. We're not commingling. We'll keep them separate. We'll keep them separate. As you know, our last show, we did the top 10 Detroit Red Wings of all time and also the top 10 Nashville Predators. You can go back and listen to that. That's our last show. But here we are, Rangers and Ducks. We're going to start with the New York Rangers, start with the classic team, and then we'll go to the little bit newer team. At this point, they're almost 30 years old, so I don't know how old Newish. They really are in terms of some other franchises, but the New York Rangers, a storied history. They've been around since the 20s, right? So we've got a lot of players to choose from. I don't know any of the players that played for them in the 20s.
Yeah, we're not doing the New York Americans either. So.
I went back and I tried to listen to their old radio broadcasts.
Did you really?
No, that sounds awful. I wonder what kind of unbiased analysis you'd get from old radio broadcasts.
If you get any kind of analysis,
true.
He passes the puck, he shoots, he scores.
What did he just say?
Like I always take like an empty like cup or whatever, and I cut my mother like sound like I'm on old timer radio, and
yeah,
it's annoying. But Kirsten hates
old time
me
radio. Okay, well, let's just dive right into these lists because nothing's happening in the rest of hockey, so we're gonna make our own hockey. This is our own hockey. All right, number 10 on your list. Let's talk about our just missed.
Oh, just missed. All right.
Our just missed.
All right. Well, I got two guys on my just missed. First guy, maybe not so obvious, Wayne Gretzky.
Okay.
He didn't make my top 10 list of Rangers.
Okay.
I mean, granted, he did spend 3 seasons there. He had 2 of them, 90 points each. So pretty dang good seasons.
Fantastic seasons. It is hard. If Gretzky played for the Columbus Blue Jackets and had 3 great seasons, right, he'd be on the list.
Absolutely.
But the New York Rangers do have quite a few great players that have played for them.
Right. And the other guy, probably one of the better defensemen. At least I think, and I know you recently have proclaimed your love for this guy's abilities on the defensive end, but Ryan McDonagh on my just missed.
Okay. I didn't even consider Ryan McDonagh for the list.
Okay.
So...
I loved it.
He's a good defenseman.
Yeah.
I don't think that he's great. Like, he's not in this list of greats.
Okay. Fair enough.
Maybe if Ryan McDonagh had played for the Atlanta Thrashers, I'd put him on the top list. Atlanta Thrashers.
if
Which we will do, by the way, and not include any current Winnipeg Jets. It's just going to be guys that played for the Atlanta Thrashers. Nick Antropov, you are going to make my list.
Kovalchuk already penciled in number 1.
The list on that. But, my number 10 is... my just missed. Adam Graves missed my list.
Okay. Wow.
Adam Graves played, I think he played 7 or 8 seasons with the Rangers.
Pretty good hockey player.
I think he benefited from the players around him more so, playing on Messier's wing and more so from the players he played with. A really nice player. Always felt more like a complimentary piece to me. And I would put him, in the grand scheme of things, he's your... maybe if you're like, all right, who's the greatest of the greats in Washington Capitals, you're probably not gonna, you might say Nicholas Backstrom, but it's definitely Ovechkin is jumping him based on who he's played with. So I just see him more as a complimentary piece. So he missed my list. Harry Howell missed my list. He played the most games as a Ranger, 1,160. Believe he's a defenseman. Just didn't. The research that I did on him, I just felt like he was kind of one of those guys that played for a really long time, was a good player, lots of longevity, but ultimately didn't do anything really worth speaking about in terms of this top 10 list. And also Phil Esposito misses my list.
I did consider him as well.
He did have some good seasons with the Rangers. Did have a really nice playoff one year. I think he had 20 points in 18 games in the playoffs with the Rangers in the late 70s. But I felt like that time the Rangers were pretty bad for most of the years that he was there. They missed the playoffs quite a few years, and other than that one nice playoff run, didn't do a whole lot to cement into the list. With that said, let's go to our number 10.
Number 10 for me, a guy that made your just missed, Adam Graves.
Okay, Adam Graves.
Yeah, and now I would agree with you. I do think he was a complimentary player, but I do think in terms of, what guys are capable of doing, I think there's a place for those guys, and I think they also complement the superstars that they're complementing. I mean, you can equally say that maybe Messier doesn't have the same sort of success in a Rangers uniform without a guy like Adam Graves. And granted, I mean, Messier is the guy that did stir the drink, but for a guy that's number 10 in all-time points for Rangers at 507, to me, he's number 10.
Yeah, he played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years with the Rangers. So
not too shabby.
Not too shabby, but I mean, a lot of those years, I mean, you're looking at, like, there's years, he had 35 points in 97, 98, 58. Like, he had some fine years, 93, 94, the year they won the Cup. He had 79 points, 52 goals, along with 127 penalty minutes. That's pretty impressive. And in the playoffs, he had 10 goals, 17 points.
Yeah, and I did read a lot, too. He was a big leader on that team. But again, you can definitely see by the stat line when there was that successful Rangers team with Messier there early, his point totals were a little bit more inflated, but yeah.
I'm not gonna fight you on the fact that he's on your list.
Okay.
He just didn't make mine. My number 10 is Brad Park.
Okay, he's a little higher on mine.
Played 465 games for the Rangers, 378 points, and in terms of defensemen, .183 points per game. It's extremely high for a defenseman, and he played there in the beginning of his career. He really went on to have a lot of his team success. Maybe later on with the Bruins, kind of maybe found his place a little more. Like, I think when you think of Brad Park, you think of him on the Bruins.
Yeah.
But did start his career and played 8 years with the kind of 7.5. Was traded 13 games into the season, but had an 82 point and a 73 point season with the Rangers in the early 70s. So, all in all, really nice player for them.
Yeah.
But just didn't ultimately do anything as a Ranger. Like, there wasn't a whole lot of, yes, there was playoffs, but a lot of that is because every team made the playoffs.
Right. I was going to say, they were a pretty mediocre team back then in the 70s. Not a whole lot to write home about. Not a lot of success. So
yeah, it looks they made it past the first round a couple times, but and he did have a couple nice playoffs, but ultimately they didn't win the Cup. He did win the Cup with the Bruins. He's probably higher on my Bruins list because of it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, he was my number 9 for a few of the reasons you laid out. And funny little fact,
he didn't win the Stanley Cup. I lied.
With the Bruins?
I don't think he did.
I think he did. Anyways, that's up for debate. Anyways, not debate. That's a factual thing. So Brad Park, funny little thing, when he had his 82-point season, finished third in the Norris voting, and I start to think, I'm like, okay, I know we weren't into the super high scoring years of defensemen like Paul Coffey in the 80s with the Oilers and things like that, but, for finishing third, come on, more than a point per game, I figured a guy would have been right up there, a little bit higher, maybe number 2 if anything. But I think those were the years Bobby Orr started taking over. So
sure. And just to clarify, he did make the Stanley Cup Finals in 1972 with the Rangers, which is when the Bruins won the Stanley Cup.
Right.
He never won the Cup with the Bruins. Made it to the Stanley Cup Finals 3 times.
Okay.
Okay. 2 times, 3 times, 2 times.
2 times. Okay.
There we go. You're number 9.
That was my number 9, Brad Park.
Oh, who's your number? Oh, you're number 10.
So we're on your number 9.
My number 9 is Wayne Gretzky.
All right.
Hello. Wayne Gretzky, obviously he's not, Adam Graves, you look at the list, he's 10th all time in scoring for the Rangers. It's just, that's a solid list. Gretzky, nowhere to be found in terms of the top 10, but the 4th most points per game, 249 points in 234 games. In the late 90s when scoring was just gone.
Dropping out.
And he was getting destroyed. Like, I can remember a lot of people talking about how the Rangers need to get someone to protect Gretzky because guys were just hacking at him. I think that's the reason why Gretzky retired. I think was that he just was like, if Gretzky was playing now, I think he would have played into his 40s.
Dude, you think about it, right? He had 2,800 some points. And he retired at what?
28.94, I think.
28. Okay, yeah. So you think he
could have played a couple more years?
Yeah, exactly. You think retiring at 38, plays a few more years, he could have broken 3,000 points easily.
Yeah, I think in his final season he had over 70 points. Yeah, or he had 62 points.
Yeah, 62.
Only 9 goals, but I mean,
It's one of the only, it might be the only season where he didn't manage a point per game pace. So
yeah.
kind of
pretty insane.
impressive to think that.
Even the lockout year, he managed exactly a point per game. And that year he was, there was in 92-93 was his injury hampered year, but that's the year that they went to the Stanley Cup final.
It was.
I think he was going through a lot of back stuff, but 65 points in 45 games. Pretty solid. So, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to fight me for Gretzky being on that list.
Nope.
I know the Rangers didn't do a whole lot in the years that he was on the Rangers. They only made the playoffs one time. They went to the third round, and he did have 20 points in 15 games. But the other 2 years, they missed the playoffs, and so ultimately not a whole lot doing for Gretzky, but I feel like he has to be on a list if he's on your team, unless you're the Blues. He doesn't get to be on the Blues list. I think he only played 18 games for them. So Gretzky makes my list number 9.
Okay. On to number 8 then. Shall I take it?
Sure.
All right. Jaromir Jagr.
He's my number 8 as well.
Dude, all right.
Exactly number 8.
Beaut. I mean, what more can be said about a guy that leads the Rangers in all-time point per games, which is another funny thing too. Like, not necessarily point per game, but I was just looking at the points total for like players for Rangers, and at number 10, 500, right? We talked about Brad Park. For an original 6 franchise as old as they are, and their number 10 all-time scorer only has 500 points, that seems a little dismal to me.
I mean, they only have one 1,000-point scorer. Yeah. I just, it seems like a lot of guys just kind of have
went in and out
of that.
Yeah, no superstars hanging around for a long time. And,
yeah.
But, yeah, so number 8 for both of us, Jaromir Jagr. He was, in again, part of those late 90s teams of the Rangers that just...
Well, early 2000s, right?
Right, was it?
The early 2000s?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you're right.
Because
I think
he won the Hart Trophy in 1999.
I'm thinking Gretzky.
Yeah, and then he was with the Rangers in 03-04.
Right. Yeah.
And then after the lockout for 3 more years.
Right. Yeah. So a team that made the playoffs 3 times during his tenure there. And I mean, granted, they didn't go deep, but they did go a couple rounds for a few of those. And he did perform admirably. So I can't say, he was to blame for any of those. But, they weren't on any powerhouse stack teams for the Rangers. So, he was the guy there. He was the straw that stirred that whole team. And, they never
when they signed him, it was a huge deal.
It was
a huge deal. So, it's...
This is a guy that was still in his prime, though, at early 30s. So
it's not his problem that they didn't have a good team around him. Okay, you're number 7.
Number 7, Jean Rattel.
Okay, all right, Jean Rattel, third highest scoring Ranger of all time. He is a little higher on my list, but 817 points.
Yeah, not too shabby for a guy that only played 861 points as a Ranger, or 100 games, I'm sorry, as a Ranger. So, pretty successful guy. I unfortunately never really got to watch much of him, so I'm just going on what I see on paper, and to me, that's why maybe he isn't a little higher.
Yeah, he's actually on NHL's top 100 players.
Is he?
Yes.
I know he is, yeah.
So
of course.
That's why he's a little higher on my list.
Okay.
I have Rod Gilbert next, who is the highest scoring New York Ranger of all time.
I do have Rod Gilbert just one spot ahead of him at 6.
So 1,021 points, over 400 goals. He is by far the most goals scored. Jean Rattel is second. It's about 70 goals behind, but...
And that's why I gave him the slight edge there. But
and that's fair. My thought was I actually have Rattel a little bit higher even than you have Rod Gilbert. Rattel, I think, being a center, just from what I'm reading, there's a reason why. All right, Rod Gilbert obviously he had more points, not on the top 100 list of players, and I think the reason why was because the thought is that Rattel was the better player, fed off of Rattel, and so I'll give the nod to him based on also, he just didn't play for the New York Rangers quite as long. He ended up another guy along with Brad Park in the same year goes to the Boston Bruins and continues to have has a very successful in 95, 96 he had over 100 points. 90 of them with the Bruins that year, 94 the next year, 84 the year after that. So he continued to be successful after he left the New York Rangers. Ended up with almost a point per game over almost 1,300 games played, just shy of a point per game. So I think ultimately the better player, maybe, all right, Rod Gilbert, he stayed with the Rangers longer. He scored more points, so it's fair to maybe put him ahead as New York Ranger. I just think Jean Rattel is a better player.
It's a fair argument to go either way.
So Rod Gilbert is my number 7.
Okay.
Jean Rattel is your number 7. You've got
Rod at number 6.
Rod at number 6. I actually have Mike Richter at number 6.
Do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Mike Richter, honestly, my best memory of Mike Richter is the 1996 World Cup.
I was going to say.
Between Canada and the U.S. and Mike Richter. It was like Cujo against Richter. And
that's old school.
That was a phenomenal series. But the Mike Richter he carried them in 1994, brought them to the Stanley Cup final as a rookie.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he was.
He was young in his. He was definitely a youngster. Let's see.
Yeah, and I mean second all time in wins for New York Rangers. He had 301 wins. Just a very solid goaltender, and you get those guys who play for the same team for their whole career. Like he's got to be on that list. He played, ironically, 666 games for the New York Rangers.
That's crazy.
Never played a game for another team. He made the playoffs 8 times and won the Stanley Cup once. Went to the third round once. Not a whole lot of playoff success, but that's kind of the story for the New York Rangers.
Yeah, I think so.
You can't really fault the goaltender on that necessarily, but
no, the late '90s they didn't have much. It sort of dwindled down, and So
ultimately, Mike Richter, does he make a lot of other teams' lists? I don't think so.
Maybe not.
But because when I think of they won the Stanley Cup with him, so that's fair.
There's a little legacy to go with that '94 Cup champion that I think just sort of cements them a little bit higher in Rangers folklore.
He won the Stanley Cup. Their only Stanley Cup since I've been alive.
Yep.
Their only Stanley Cup since a lot of people that I know have been alive. Because I think it's 94 and 54, right?
It was a drought.
So, and it continues it's another drought. Just not as long as the Leafs. Womp womp. Okay, so he's my number 6, and then I have Jean Rattel at number 5. Who's your number 5?
Mike Richter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we basically had those 3 guys just kind of swapping them.
Yeah, and maybe it's a little goalie love for me, maybe a little bit, but when I think of Mike Richter, I think of that goalie mask, man, that Statue of Liberty right on the front, just
it's a sweet mask.
Felt comfort.
That's probably the difference between, like, if we were both 50 years old, we would probably say, like, Jean Rattel would and
right.
Gilbert would be way above Richter, and he might be further down the list.
Sure.
Gretzky might even be higher up some people's lists. I mean, when you look at Richter's stats, you're like, okay, scoring was down, therefore goaltending should have been been a little easier, and he still barely has a 900 save percentage, 904, and a 289 goals against average. So definitely not amongst the upper echelon of goaltenders, but he won the Stanley Cup for them.
That's very true. Yeah, I've seen some lists where they have him a little higher up at like 3 or 4 and stuff.
That's crazy.
I couldn't go that high with a guy like that because of those stats.
Who's your number 4?
Number 4 is Andy Bathgate. To me, a legendary Ranger.
I actually have his rookie card.
Do you really?
And it's worth a lot of money, and I like it.
I would like to know exactly how much that's worth, to be quite honest.
I'll find it.
Yeah, please do. What's not to be said about Andy Bathgate?
What's not to be said? Never watched him play, but he's also another guy on the top 100 players for the Rangers. I probably pound for pound the best player to play out his whole career. Like, I think probably better than Jean Rattel, better than Rod Gilbert, and played so much of his career with the Rangers, 719 games.
Yeah, and just finishing over a point per game too at 729.
Especially when, like, goal scoring definitely in the 50s was way down. I mean, he had a 40 goal season, he had a 30 goal season, a couple 30 goal seasons. So yeah, definitely a guy who was stirring the drink, as you say, and won a Stanley Cup with the New York
your
Rangers.
Leafs, not the Rangers.
Oh, he didn't win a Stanley Cup.
No, with your Leafs. But in 63-64.
They won the Stanley Cup in 54.
He didn't start playing with them till 50. Oh, wait.
No, he was playing with them in 52.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Hold on.
Maybe the Rangers didn't win. Am I thinking of 44?
Maybe.
44 is when it was.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
not
to look this
1954. It was 1944.
I was gonna say he only played 20 games though in 54 with the Rangers. So unfortunately, they
never really had much playoff history. Only 7 years making the playoffs, but obviously that's not his fault. But it had great regular seasons. I would agree. He's actually higher up on my list, based on, especially, people that actually can watch him and know what they're talking about in terms of his actual play.
Sure.
He's in the top 100 players. And so I think based on the amount that he played for the Rangers, he played over 10 seasons, 12 seasons for the Rangers. He's a little higher on my list. Mark Messier is my number 4, actually.
Ooh, okay. He's my number 3.
Okay, yeah. I struggled with Mark Messier, and the reason why 691 points in 698 games, fantastic. Not to mention almost a penalty minute per game too. 667 penalty minutes as well.
That's crazy.
Obviously, he was, maybe the most famous New York Ranger.
The guarantee.
Probably you go around and you ask people like, who's your favorite New York Ranger of all time? There's probably quite a few people who will say Mark Messier.
Absolutely.
Probably a lot. So him being higher on a list, that's fine. He only played 6 years there.
Yeah, which is why I couldn't justify putting him any higher.
Well, he played 6, and then he played another 4 later in his career. He actually did okay. So I guess he played 10 years there.
Yeah, but still, just
made the playoffs only 5 times in his 10 years as a Ranger, and 93, 94. The guy had 30 points in 23 games.
That's pretty good.
That's phenomenal. When's the last time somebody had 30 points in the playoffs?
Oh, yeah, that's I think Sidney Crosby.
Sidney Crosby had 30?
Yeah, I think he did at one time. But after,
so he's not on your list?
No. He's yeah, no. He's number 3 on my list.
He's number 3.
I couldn't put him higher though because he, granted, he did play 10 seasons, but I think after that guarantee, the year when they won the cup, after that, it sort of, you could see it sort of, tailing off a little bit.
And then he ended up going to Vancouver, and that was kind of a fail. And
it was, but you look at the rest of the NHL around them, they were starting to, play this different style of, not so much as a high tempo game anymore, and the Rangers just never really adjusted to that, and I don't think it worked out in their favor because as you can tell, they just didn't really have any success afterwards. So,
they were signing guys like Peter Nedved to these huge deals. Okay, so my number 4 is Messier.
My number 3 is Messier.
Your number 3 is Messier.
So who's your number 3?
My number 3 is your boy Henrik Lundqvist.
Okay,
my 3rd best all-time New York Ranger. I will say this.
I'm glad he at least made your top 3.
He did make my top 3. Some of this is, the guy almost has, he'll probably have 500 wins by the time his career is over. Now, I'll say this. Rangers are maybe headed into a time of harvesting here. They've definitely been planning. And so now is the sowing. I guess so. Maybe he ends up higher on this list by the end of his career. Let's say the Rangers have a couple really nice playoff runs with him as their starting goaltender in the back end of his career. That could maybe push him a little bit higher. As far as I'm concerned, they've had one really nice run, maybe a couple if you consider his conference finals.
Yeah.
But one run to the Stanley Cup Finals, they lose to the Blackhawks. And really, other than that, not a lot of playoff success. I know I've been saying that's not his fault, which is true, but I just think that there's better players ahead of him. And yeah, there's better players ahead of him.
It sucks when you're trying to compare goaltenders to actual skaters, right?
Agreed,
because you're looking at apples versus oranges, and it's harder to compare stats when you're like, oh, what's a 920 career save percentage versus 1,100 points?
Well, and it's not even like we're talking about somebody who also played alongside him, who was more impactful.
Right.
We're talking, I have Andy Bathgate at number 2, so we're talking about 2 guys that played 50 years apart. Totally different. People don't know. Of course, you might be sitting there going, dude, Henrik Lundqvist. Screw this Andy Bathgate guy. Get him lower on your list. Henrik Lundqvist is the guy. But when I when I
as far as I'm concerned, best dressed Ranger in history.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and for a lot of teams, he would be the top player.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, he'll end up going down as one of the best goaltenders in NHL history. I think he'll be up there. Maybe not top 10, maybe not top 20, but he'll be up there in terms of when you say all-time greats, you could throw his name in there. But the only problem is the lack of success in the playoffs, right? You know, not getting that Stanley Cup in his career so far has kind of pushed him down into that next tier of, you know, great goaltenders. And so it's hard to justify a guy being higher on a list. And I think for me, he came in at number 2 on my list. And, you know, maybe if he had a Stanley Cup ring to go with it, maybe then I could push him to number 1. But it's kind of hard to without the success to follow it. I mean, yes, he does have a Vezina. You know, he's got some hardware to go along with it, a lot of all-star appearances. But again, it's just
interesting that he just has one Vezina.
Yeah.
Granted, you know,
well, I mean,
you compare some goalie that played in the original 6 where they're like, oh, Jacques Plante has 8 Vezinas. Well, yeah, because there were 6 other goalies, or 5 other goalies that were up for it. So, yeah, if you're better than 5 other guys, then you win the Vezina every time. But
yeah, I still remember that series against Tampa Bay, though, in the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, he took that team on his back, and I remember just that game-winning goal when he's trying to, the blocker reaching out to try to grab, and just it still breaks my heart to this day because I did want the Rangers, especially against Chicago too. I wanted them to beat Chicago. I hated Chicago at the time.
I'm sure you did as a Red Wings fan.
Yeah, just did not care for Jonathan Taves' beard, so I did not want that man lifting a cup. But
scraggly beard. So my number 2 is Andy Bathgate. Your number 2 is
Lundqvist.
Yeah. So then our number 1 is likely the same.
I hope so.
Derek Stepan.
Yep.
Brian Leetch is I think both our number 1s. Brian Leetch, definitely the best defenseman to ever play for the Rangers. Probably the best American defenseman to ever play the game.
Yeah, you can make the argument for Chelios, but I think at the end of the day,
definitely different types of defensemen.
Yes,
I guess in terms of offensive defensemen, puck moving.
Oh, without a doubt.
Then yeah,
he went about his business quietly too. Like he wasn't flashy when he played, but he got it done.
981 points in 1129, so 869 points per game.
That's, for a defenseman, that's freaking awesome.
That's great,
especially like we talked about in the 90s when scoring was down.
Not to mention, the 240 goals is nothing to balk at. I mean, that's 9th all time for the Rangers in goals.
Wow.
And for a defenseman to be on that list, the next highest is Ron Greschner, who played almost 1,000 games and had 179 goals.
Jeez, yeah, 2 Norrises, got the Conn Smythe.
The next highest defenseman, I don't even know where they are because there is no defenseman with more goals than 112, and that is how high this list goes that I have of all-time 50 scorers. So, so there's only 2 defensemen on that list of most points, or most goals. I guess James Patrick is probably the next highest, who had 104 goals. So,
wow.
Yeah, so to be anywhere on that list in terms of defensemen is impressive. So. And won some Norrises.
Yeah, two of them.
2 Norrises.
2 Norrises and 1 Conn Smythe, like I said.
He won that Conn Smythe in 94.
He did. Yeah. You could have easily given it to Messier or even Richter at that point.
Messier had 30 points and he didn't win it.
That shows you the impact that Leetch had on the game during the playoffs.
He in 91-92, he had 102 points.
Yeah. Brian Leetch, though, 34 points.
Oh, 34 points.
Eat that up, Messier.
Wow. 34 points.
I don't know
for
the last time. Yeah,
that maybe,
for a defenseman.
Is that the most points ever for a defenseman?
I'm going to look it up.
In the playoffs. Yeah, look that up. And while you do, there's our list. The New York Rangers. Tweet at us at OT Hockey Talk. Let us know what you think of our list. With that said, we are going to quickly move over to the Anaheim Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks have a much shorter history, but in fairness, they've won the Stanley Cup the same amount of times since the Anaheim Ducks have come into existence.
To answer the question real quick before we get going, only one other person has scored most. Yes. That was pretty obvious.
In the 80s when everyone was scoring.
84, 85, 37.
Okay.
So
there you go. That'll never be beaten. Not a chance that'll ever
next
be
closest, Al McInnes in 89 with the Flames with 31, and then it drops off into the mid-20s.
Yeah. I mean, mid-20s for playoffs just in general is great.
Even for a forward.
For a forward, yeah. Yeah, if you're a defenseman and you end up with a point per game in the playoffs, you're doing something right. Okay, on to the Anaheim Ducks. I will start this list off with my just missed. I'm going to start off with John Gibson. Didn't think he's played enough games for the team yet. As both Jonas Hiller and Frederick Anderson, and among some other goaltenders who I have on my actual list, have played more playoff games and won more games in the playoffs. And so he misses my list. I think he's won 100 and what do we have? 119 games. So 2 guys ahead of him, Jonas Hiller, and then 3 guys ahead of him. But then also playoff success. John Gibson hasn't had much, and so I think he went to the conference finals the 1 year, right? Was he their goaltender when they went to the conference finals?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So
and they lost to Nashville.
So he misses my list along with Jakob Silfverberg. You wouldn't think Jakob Silfverberg would even be in contention, but ultimately when you look at this team's goal scoring, he is 9th all time or 8th all time in goal scoring. And in terms of goals per game, he's actually pretty low. But he does 9th all time in goals, and he's up there in points too. 233 points. He's 11th all time in points. So he misses my list. He was on some people's lists. That's why I'm addressing it. And then Bobby Ryan, 6th all time in scoring. I just don't think that he should be on this list.
Was he a product of playing with Perry and Getzlaf more than anything?
I think so, but I also I think that he, the way that he went out and the way that he played in Ottawa, like I just think there's something tainted to him, and I just don't think that he needs to be on this list. I mean, he played 378 games for the Ducks, that's 21st all time. But I think there's more deserving players ahead of this. So with that said, you're just missed. Anybody?
Yeah, my just missed. I got John Gibson on there too.
Okay.
I was with you. I really wanted to put him on there because I think
he will be on.
Yes, when it's all said and done, I do think he will end up being one of the top 10, best Ducks of all time, and I'm still going to refer to them as the Mighty Ducks because that still pisses me off to this day.
Some of these guys are the Mighty Ducks.
They are.
Some of them are Ducks.
And greatest jerseys of all time. By the way, I will argue that
the third jersey where the duck is smashing through the wall.
Oh my gosh!
You remember that one?
I do.
Yeah,
that's
sweet.
Ugly.
I love that. I had a hockey card of I think it was Paul Correa maybe, and there was just, or maybe it was like Oleg Tverdovsky or something.
Tverdovsky.
Anyways,
all right. Yeah, he's on that list. Bobby Ryan was another guy I juggled with a little bit, but ultimately I did think his success was more on the back of other players around him, as we've seen with his time in Ottawa. I mean, granted, he is, probably more in line with a 40-point player, but, his numbers were a little skewed in Anaheim, and I think it came back down to reality. Clearly, he just...
paid off for him.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, you score 30 goals for 4 straight seasons, and then Ottawa's like, oh, we'll give you $7.5 million. Anyways... So he made my just missed, and so did Rob Niedermeyer. Niedermeyer's more of our heart and soul type of player.
Yep.
Third line guy that just
and came in there a little bit. He was there and basically just won a cup. He signed with them to play with his brother, right? So.
Yeah, he did. But I loved him watching him play, and so I maybe that was just more of a just watching that guy play and just loved seeing him on the ice. So number 10 though, maybe a little bit of a surprise for me, but Chris Kunitz.
Chris Kunitz, yeah. It's, a lot of people forget that his career started with the Anaheim Ducks.
Yeah, a lot of people, probably focus a little bit more of his time when he was with Pittsburgh. Maybe, not as much success as other guys, but, close to 200 points in his time there. And
11th all time in goals with 81.
Yeah, and he did. I mean, he literally came in and won the Stanley Cup and then pieced out, right? So
pretty much, yeah. He played. So he was on the Ducks, and then during the lockout year, he played for their AHL team, and then he ended up playing for the Atlanta Thrashers, and then he ends up back on the Ducks and puts up 41 points in 67 games, and then 60 points in 81 games, scored 25 goals, and in those playoffs when the Ducks won the Stanley Cup, he was
a little hurt, but
he had 1 goal. But he did win the Stanley Cup.
He did, yeah. So
good on him.
4-time
Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah,
Kunitz.
He bolted at the right time and went to Pittsburgh, and then had some good success with them. And congrats on him. He's retired now. I think he's with the Chicago staff now as a scout or something.
Yep. He didn't make my list. I just didn't think that he
That's
was
fair.
better than some of these guys. I have Steve Ruchin at number 10.
Ooh.
Steve Ruchin, if you don't know who he is, he was the guy who centered Paul Kariya and Teemu Selanne. So absolutely did he benefit from them? Yes, but he also was a guy who he was more he was 6'2", 209. He was a little bit bigger of a guy. He didn't pick up a lot of penalty minutes, but he used his body. He was the guy who would go into the corners for those guys and get in front of the net, and it worked. Like you need a guy who is different than your other two players to make that work. Like Selanne and Kariya, that's who everybody thinks of. But Steve Ruchin, big reason why those guys worked, and he was, from what I remember, a really good face-off guy as well, and so that always helps. His best season was in 96-97. He put up 67 points, but he played for the Ducks for 10 years, 10 seasons.
Okay.
So a pretty impactful guy, and was there almost from the beginning. He was actually taken, yes, he was taken in the supplemental draft, second overall. So.
All right. Good deal. He's got a couple... He's a couple spots higher on my list, but number 9 for me, I've got Francois Beauchemin.
Okay,
Yeah.
Francois Beauchemin didn't make my list.
Yeah, not the flashiest of guys when you talk about point totals, but to me, this is more or less because I got to watch quite a bit of him as a Red Wings fan.
14th all-time in points.
Yes.
196, so there's only 3 defensemen ahead of him on that list.
Yeah, was never a guy known for scoring, but he quietly played just rock-solid defense back there. And I mean, he was one of those guys. He was a leader on and off the ice. He was reliable, and to me that weighed a lot into my decision. Just because he led to a lot of successful seasons for the Ducks, just because he could be relied upon. And then of course when he got a little older, a little slower, and the NHL started to change, obviously he saw his way out and went to Colorado and.
He goes to Colorado and Toronto.
Yeah, and he ended up coming back to Anaheim after Toronto, but yeah, I mean, he wasn't too unsuccessful in either of those teams.
No, and in their playoff run, he did have 8 points.
Yeah.
When they won the Stanley Cup, 8 points in 20 games, really by far his best playoff, I think. The year before he had 9 points in 16 games. So he definitely rose to the occasion. So that's fair. Didn't make my list. My number 9 is another defenseman for the Anaheim Ducks, and it's Cam Fowler.
Okay. I thought about him too. And
Cam Fowler, 7th all-time in scoring for the Ducks. 620 games for the Ducks, which is 4th all-time for the Ducks. Most amongst defensemen, barely eclipsing Ruslan Saleh, if you remember Ruslan Saleh. Cam Fowler, he may not have been a part of the best teams. He's kind of been, the Ducks have kind of been in this place where they're good one year and they're not the next. And they kind of have had these, like they dip for a while and then they come back strong. And then they dip again and they come back strong. And Cam Fowler, a guy who, when he was drafted, I don't know if you remember his draft year, he went 12th overall in 2010, but a lot of people had him like 6th, 7th, and it was watching. So I think some people had him 3 or 4, and it was this big slide. Like, where's Cam Fowler going to land? And they end up, I think, getting a steal of a guy at number 12 who was coming nicely and really. You can put anybody with him; they're going to play well. He's a good defenseman. Granted, is he on a list if you're talking about the Chicago Blackhawks? No.
Right.
But the Ducks, in terms of defensemen who have played there for a long time, I think that definitely tips it in his favor as well.
Okay, that's fair. He's a guy for me that I remember not being very responsible defensively early on in his career, but it's rounded out.
Yeah.
And he looks like just...
How many defensemen are really good in their own zone early on in their career?
That's very true. Very true. It's a hard position to learn, and it's turned out pretty well for him. He's a top 2, top 4 guy for just about any team in the NHL, I think, nowadays.
And my money is on him staying there for a while longer.
Sure.
So, I mean, right now he's just barely below. He's just barely above Steve Ruchin, but he's 4th all-time in games played. He's got a while to go to the next guy. The next guy is Solani at 966. So he'll have to be there for another 5 years or so for him to hit that list. But who is your number 8?
Yeah, a guy who's 5th all-time in points for the Ducks, Steve Ruchin, like you said, centered that incredible line of Solani and Korea for so long. Now, yeah, probably a lot of his success was due to playing between those two guys, but you've got to be somewhat skilled to play with guys like that. And so I do think he does warrant a little piece of heaven on the top 10 list. So for me, he comes in at number 8.
Okay, my number 8 is Hampus Lindholm.
Ooh,
who is
interesting.
In my opinion, I think their best defenseman right now, as good as Cam Fowler is, I think Hampus Lindholm is their number 1 defenseman. I think that he's only going to continue to grow. He's 20.
26, I think. Maybe even younger.
25 years old. So he's already almost played 450 games in the league. He's not even 25. So that's I think that he'll continue to move up this list too. 18th all time in scoring as a defenseman. He's the 4th most in Anaheim history. I think is continuing to get better as well. And if this team sees any success, then Hampus Lindholm I think will be a big part of it. So
okay. I approve. So number 7 for me, Chris Pronger.
Same.
Yeah.
Yep.
Not a lot of years with the Ducks. He played 3 seasons, but you could see it in Edmonton, the kind of difference a guy like that can make for a team, right? Went in with Edmonton and beat what were supposed to be the Stanley Cup favorite Detroit Red Wings in the first round.
Yeah. The team that had won the Cup the year before.
Right. And it took them within they went to the Stanley Cup Finals that year. And then
I guess they won the Cup a few years before that.
Right. But anyways, Steve Yzerman's last game as a Red Wing, I actually have a picture of him skating off the ice. And
I was in this in college, and I was in this room watching it with people, and I was so happy with it. Did they win in overtime in Game 7 or something? Or was it
was something crazy. But Dwayne Rollison stood on his head too, and Chris Pronger was a big part of that. And then of course he goes to Anaheim, and you see that tandem of him and Scott Niedermayer just destroyed everybody defensively. They cleaned up. And
he even had in 07-08, he had in 72 games he had 128 penalty minutes.
Yeah,
he was in the box a lot.
Yeah, he played that rough style of hockey, threw a lot of elbows and a lot of slashes. But so for me, he's a guy who led that team to a lot of success and was a big leader on that team, even though he wasn't there for too long.
I think we can say that the reason the Ducks won the Cup, without Pronger, do the Ducks win the Cup that year?
No,
it's
very
definitely
unlikely.
Less likely. I have him at number 7 too. Who's your number 6?
6, Corey Perry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got Corey Perry a little bit higher on my list.
I wanted to put him a little bit higher, but boy, his last few seasons and then getting bought out by the team, to me, didn't speak volumes in terms of wanting. I mean, it just made it a lot harder to put him higher. I mean, granted, yes, he's 3rd all time in points on this team. He's number 1 in games played, which is going to be eclipsed by Getzlaf this season because he's got 4 to go.
Yep. Also 2nd all time in goals.
Yeah, but to me, I think Corey Perry, yes, very successful. He does have a Hart Trophy to go with it.
Most penalty minutes in the history of the team, 1,110.
Wow.
The next highest, Ryan Getzlaf at 830. The next highest in a third of the games, 812 penalty minutes for George Barros. 356
I love the mustache.
games.
The mustache was fantastic. He fought everybody, and I loved watching him. I actually thought about putting him on this list just because of how exciting he was to watch for me. And my cousin and I, remember, we would play NHL, 08 or whatever, and we would always hate playing the Ducks because Barros would just run you over every single time in that game. But
Corey Perry is the only Duck to ever win a Hart.
He is. Very surprising. But for me, watching him play a lot, and when he wasn't with Getzlaf, you could see his production dip, and he just wasn't the same player. And maybe that's because, those last, 3-4 years, he slowed down a ton. But, again, you can make the argument, was really Getzlaf the reason he had so much success? So, I don't know. Same with Ruchin, I guess. Maybe my feeling was he wasn't as good of a player if he was on a line with someone else.
Oh, also a winger. There's a few wingers that can dominate. Although, the guys up on my list. I have, at number 6, I actually have Paul Kariya. I was surprised at how low I put him.
Yeah, I am too, actually.
Now, in terms of talent, Paul Correa versus Corey Perry, I think it's Paul Correa is the better player. But who's the better Anaheim Duck? I think I have Corey Perry ahead of him on this list because, I mean, yes, really in 360 less games or 380 less games, Correa only had really 100 less points. But Corey Perry, he won the cup with the Ducks. Correa didn't. Correa had a little bit shorter of a career with the Ducks. Decided to leave. It was his choice to leave. So with that, I felt like he needed to be a little bit higher. And Corey Perry had that year that they won the cup, 15 points, which essentially was it was his second year in the league, putting up 15 points in the playoffs. Pretty solid for him. So I have him higher. Paul Correa. It hurts to put him at 6.
Yeah, it hurts me to listen to you say that.
But, just also, consider the fact that Corey Perry was a totally different type of player. Like, Paul Correa was a little water bug, right? Like, he's just going everywhere. And honestly, when I think of Paul Correa on the Ducks, I do think of some of the great things that he did. Like, the guy just had an IQ higher than everyone on the ice. But where does my mind go? Scott Stevens freaking ending him.
Oh, I know. I remember that vicious
and him
hit.
just a little like he looked like if you've ever squished a bug before and the bug tries to crawl away and it doesn't. It's has a broken wing, so it keeps on kind of moving up and then smashes back into the ground. That's what it looked like. That's what I think of. And unfortunately, his career was hampered by some of those concussions and he maybe would have been even better. Paul Correa, in terms of, I put him on a higher list of best players ever. He'd be ahead of Corey Perry because just the one goal, 2002, on a line with Mario Lemieux, and Paul Correa gets that pass where Lemieux lets the puck go in between his legs in the goal in the gold medal game, and Paul Correa's on the other side of him and puts it in. Do you remember that goal?
I do.
That's like an insane goal. Like, you go back and watch that. Just go look up, Paul Correa gold medal goal. That goal was insane. So you're number 5.
Number 5 for me, Paul Correa.
Okay, so not that much higher.
No, not that. The reason
you said it hurt.
I know. It
hurt. Well, you had one spot higher. God.
I just wanted to F with you. Anyways, the only reason I looked at a lot of lists and he was a lot higher on people's list, but when I go back and I roll the playoff production, it just wasn't there for me.
Yeah,
he literally never had more than.
Just didn't have the team.
No,
when they made the playoffs, a lot of times they were. But they played the Wings a couple times in the late '90s.
They did upset them once.
And did they upset them?
They upset.
No, well, in 2003 they upset them.
Right,
but in the '90s they didn't.
No, not at all.
They played them at least once. I think they took them to 6 games, and they made a run of it, but. The Red Wings were. I think
Red Wings were the Red Wings.
Yeah, the Red Wings. Yeah, 99. I think they played the Red Wings. So look that up.
But just that lack of success in the playoffs. I want to pull up the number.
It makes it less. It makes him have a less memorable career.
It does. His first season, at 22, 13 points in 11 games, great. After that, nowhere to be found. He had 12 points in those 21 games in an 0-3 run. Maybe you get a little bit more production. Granted, I know the head injury against New Jersey, but
also remember that. In the finals, you're playing the New Jersey Devils, who are those games were
2-1, 1-0,
1-0.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the game 7 was 3-0. Like, they couldn't score.
No, absolutely not. And that's why they ultimately lost. And I think after that, they really didn't have much playoff success. Well, actually, they didn't have any playoff success with him because he never made the playoffs again as a Duck. So,
my number 5 is a guy who has one of 2 Conn Smythe trophies for the Anaheim Ducks.
Ooh,
and is the one who won it in 2003. Jean-Sebastien Giguère.
Wait, did you say one of 2 Conn Smythes?
Yeah.
Okay. No, the way you said it, you made it sound like Giguère's got 2 Conn Smythe trophies.
No, he has one of 2 for the Ducks, right?
I just had to clarify that in case.
Who won it in 2007? Was it Pronger? Or
Niedermeyer?
Niedermeyer.
Yeah.
It was Niedermeyer, yeah. Jean-Sebastien Giguère, just unreal in terms of this. It was almost like people knew about him. People knew that he was a good goalie. And then, granted, I do think that particular run, he just happened to get have one of those Jose Theodore kind of moments where he just went outside himself and went crazy. He also was their goaltender in 2007, won the cup there too. So obviously had another good run as well. 182 save or 197 in that year for his save percentage. But the year he won the Conn Smythe, he won 15 games, a 946 save percentage.
Just unreal.
Just unbelievable what he was able to do. But also had a really nice career. I mean, he has the most wins all time for Ducks goaltenders. He has 206 wins in 447 games. So no one's touching that for a little bit. I think John Gibson definitely has a shot to climb this list pretty fast. But yeah, Jean-Sebastien Giguère, just based off that one run,
was unreal.
Is going to be on this list. Even if he had done nothing else for the Ducks, that one run, that's it.
Absolutely.
But he's number 5 on my list because there's some players ahead of him.
Okay, fair enough. Number 4.
My number 4 is Corey Perry. We've already been through that.
Yeah, we've been through that.
So you go ahead and give your number 4.
Number 4 is Scott Niedermayer.
Okay, he's my number 3.
Okay, yeah. I've got J.S. Giguère as number 3.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So we just have a couple guys mixed around. Putting Niedermayer there. Why?
Well,
ahead of or below Jean-Sebastien Giguère.
Yeah, I think it came down to one. Yeah, there was success when Niedermayer was there, but he was only there for 4 years. Came in the first year, won a cup, and then had a few decent seasons after that, and that was pretty much it. Where Giguère was there through some of the rougher years, he was there through some of the good years. He carried this team on his back, obviously in 2003, and played pretty darn good. I mean, in 2007 when they actually won the thing, and so I guess seeing more of him as a Duck from me just was like, okay, great. I think this guy deserves just the nod over Scott Niedermayer, even though during his 4 years, Scott Niedermayer was great. He was a fantastic leader, fantastic player for this team, and I don't think, without making that transition in the Getzlaf, I think this team would have been lost after he left, for sure.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So your number 2 then, I'm going to guess is Ryan Getzlaf.
No. Ilya Bryzgalov.
What?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, why did I just believe you for a second? That's funny that
Bryzgalov should make nobody's list. Not Phillies, nobody's.
Craziest people to ever play for the Ducks.
Okay, yeah,
Bryzgalov gets the top of the list.
He's number 1 on any team's list.
Yes.
Unreal. Yeah, Getzlaf number 2 for me.
Most likely to believe that President Trump is actually a lizard. A lizard people. Have you ever seen the lizard people conspiracy theory?
God, no.
Go look up the lizard people.
I can't even with that. Fantastic. That's too much.
Ryan Getzlaf number 2 puts Teemu Selanne at number 1.
Clearly.
And I think if Ryan Getzlaf finds a way, leads this team to something before all is said and done, there is a way that he can jump Teemu Selanne.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fair to say. Again, he's got to have more continued success. I think Ryan Getzlaf has been one of the more consistent Ducks over the last decade. That just watching the guy, he shows up all the time. Granted, his last few seasons, maybe he's dealt with a little bit more injuries than normal.
Well, and he also just doesn't score the goals.
No, he doesn't.
Granted, he still is 4th all time in goals, but 261 goals in 984 games. He, to
me, he
in
is
terms of goals per game, he's at. He's pretty low down on the list,
Yeah, he's not a goal scorer, but granted, neither is Joe Thornton. But we talk about Jumbo Joe as if he's one of the greatest ever. One of the greatest passers ever, and I think
he's 20th all time goals per game.
That's wow. Okay, yeah, I think Getzlaf is probably the end of that power forward type, centerman. That big body guy that goes and plays hard. And
yeah, but Jack Eichel's probably the next closest in terms of this.
Well, there you go.
Which that's not really he's not much of a power forward, but that's a big guy who can use his body to shield the puck. I think is more like Austin Matthews uses his body to shield the puck, not a power forward, but maybe the game's power forward.
Sure, the new game's power forward. Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, Selanne top all times in points for this team. He did get the ring, which was just fantastic to watch. I was happy for him when he did get that. And I'd love to hear a little bit more. I know you did some looking up about the trade from from the Jets to going over to the
Getzlaf
Ducks.
also had the ring too.
Well, I know
he had
that.
17
He
points
did.
in 21 games. Had a good playoff.
He did. Absolutely.
But yeah, so Teemu Selanne, this sparked me to go, all right, how in the world did the Ducks just end up with Teemu Selanne? Like I was only maybe like 8 years old, I think, when he got traded.
Yeah, it would be like,
So-
it would be like if, I don't know who to maybe to compare him to today, but you could say like,
I give Mitch Marner leaps.
Okay,
around,
yeah, sure.
you're
Yeah,
to think of
perfect.
that. So, obviously, but the difference is 92-93, he comes in the league, puts up 76 goals, has 132 points. He breaks the previous rookie goal record was 52 goals.
just smashes
It
it.
has 76.
Yeah, best
Didn't-
celly ever.
Tied for the league lead in goals,
Right.
with McGillney, but then set the rookie record for points as well, with 132. The following year, he actually tears his Achilles, and he still puts up 25 goals. Then there's the lockout, puts up 22 goals in 45 games. 95-96 comes. He's got 72 points at the time that they trade him in 51 games.
Nothing to shake your head at.
No, nothing at all.
When we're seeing a league that
No.
goal scoring is going down.
Remember, this is 95-96, the Jets. Where do the Jets go at the end of the 95-96 season?
To the desert.
They go to the desert.
Yeah.
They go and they become the Phoenix Coyotes. So, because the reason they trade him is actually because of a different scenario, something else that happened. Keith Tkachuk was also on the Winnipeg Jets.
He was, yeah.
And all year long, he kept saying he did not want to re-sign with the Jets. So he's a restricted free agent. And
Keith Tkachuk is.
Keith Tkachuk
Okay.
is a restricted free agent. So other teams had given him offer sheets, but he didn't want to sign them because he was afraid that the Jets would match, and then he'd be forced to
stuck.
play for the Jets for a year, right? Like just like what
Right.
happened to Ryan O'Reilly years later. So Keith Tkachuk actually accepts an offer sheet from the Chicago Blackhawks that is set to give him, some overpayment as in terms of what they saw as an overpayment for him, for a guy who. He scored 30 goals his first 3 years in the league, so it wasn't an overpayment. But
Sure.
it was going to pay him $6 million in signing bonus, and they didn't think that the Jets could afford it.
Right.
They knew
Much
the Jets.
like Carolina Montreal
Yep.
situation. Yeah.
Difference is the Jets weren't owned by a billionaire,
Right.
but they matched it, and because they matched it, the new owner, the guy who was going to take over in Phoenix, said, we're only going to keep one superstar. And they felt like Keith Tkachuk as the American was an easier guy to market than Selanne as the Finnish player.
Interesting.
And so they decided to trade Selanne. Now they trade Selanne. Here's the deal. Chad Kilger and Oleg Tverdovsky and a third-round pick for Teemu Selanne and a couple of
And a fourth-round pick,
And
yeah.
there's one other guy in there who inconsequential. Needless to say, you go, holy smokes, the Jets / Coyotes got absolutely destroyed. Now, second overall draft pick, Tverdovsky. Fourth overall pick, Chad Kilger. And a third round pick for Selanne. And you
So basically two first and a
think
third.
about right now, if you traded a second overall pick, a fourth overall pick, guys that are both, like one guy was 20 and one other guy was 19. And a third round pick for anyone. Like that's outside of a couple guys, that's a pretty darn good deal. And at the time, a lot of people thought that the Ducks got ripped off. And that the
Interesting.
Jets had a steal of a deal because Oleg Tverdovsky was actually thought of to be the Russian Bobby Orr. That's what they were calling him.
The Russian Bobby Orr.
And Chad Kilger was seen as like the prototypical power forward. He was going to be the reason why the Jets were willing to get rid of him was because they had Keith Tkachuk, so they didn't need Chad Kilger.
Wow.
So they,
Think about
they
it
dealt him.
in these terms, right? Two drafts ago, Andrei Svechnikov and Brady Tkachuk for Mitch Marner. And a third round pick, would you essentially do that as the Leafs, you know?
I mean, as the Leafs, you'd be like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so
But I also think, you go back and you look at some of these drafts and you're like, why did you take him at third overall? Like that guy didn't end up being anything. Whereas now there's a lot fewer busts. I think there's just better
scouting.
Better scouting.
Because
Also,
teams are investing money in
better
that sort of
training.
thing. Absolutely.
Like, guys aren't falling off the way that maybe they used to. And also I think there's better accountability for guys. I think they know some of these guys can't be left to their own devices or they'll die or become Alexander Dake and want to become an actor halfway through.
Oh, boy.
So yeah, Teemu Selanne. That's how we got dealt to the Ducks.
Little history lesson for you.
Basically, and a lot of people thought that he lost his speed when he tore his Achilles, and that he was damaged goods.
Well, I mean, you did see the production slip off. I mean, in terms of 132 down to a 70-point guy. Sure, yeah. There's reason to think is this guy ever going to get back up to that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, 51 games he had 72 points.
Right.
And
Freaking
24 goals. So he ended up with 40 goals and 108 points that year. The next year he has 109 points. Next year 86, then 107. Like, we're talking in the years where goal scoring was down.
Right.
I mean, this guy was still cleaning up. And it's the crazy thing is that he eventually goes to the Sharks. He kind of has some weird years, and then it was later in his career, like the year they won the Cup in the regular season. He had 94 points. Like, in the fourth year
as a 36-year-old,
fourth to last year in the league, he had 80 points in 2010-11.
Yeah, that's when your hockey IQ is just so good.
Yeah,
you don't need to have speed.
16 power play goals that year. One in 06-07, he had 25 power play goals.
That's unheard of.
I'm sure he's pretty high on all-time power play goals. He had actually 2 years where he's had 25 and another year where he had 24 power play goals. So he's got to be up there with Dave Andreychuk, all-time leader in power play goals.
Wow, all right.
Wonder if Ovechkin will catch him. All right, next show, top 10 Washington Capitals, because I just brought up Alexander Ovechkin.
Speaking of Capitals, to answer your question, when we were curious about when's the last time a guy had 30 points in a playoff, Kuznetsov did it when the Caps won. So.
Oh, all right. There you go. So all-time Caps next, and the other team is?
Ooh, good question. So let's stick in the West then. How about we do National? No, we already did Nashville Predators. I don't know why I said that. Boy, tick-tock. Why don't we
St. Louis Blues?
Okay, done.
The two last teams to win the Cup.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
The Blues and the Washington Capitals. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know what you thought of our lists. And, we'll talk to you guys very soon. Enjoy